Senator Menendez. Senator Haggerty from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody today. Over the past year, law enforcement has recovered billions in stolen crypto. All of this has been done in an ecosystem that has been often described as anonymous, illicit, the Wild West, in fact, of illicit finance. But in my view, it's inconsistent with the architecture of blockchain technology because most cryptocurrencies are built on a public ledger that makes the chain of ownership visible. And by extension, it makes it traceable to any token's existence at any point. Mr. Levin, I'll start with you. Cryptocurrencies are pseudo-anonymous, right? The wallet address themselves don't identify the owners. But with the proper tools and proper legal authority, what capabilities exist to actually track and identify illicit actors in cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin?
Thank you, Senator. And it's an important point to make because it's often conceived that cryptocurrency is not as transparent as it actually is. And so, when it comes to having the necessary tools in place, Chainalysis, what we do is we map all the transactions that occur in cryptocurrencies to the entities and services that people are using to conduct that activity. And so the fact that all of the industry and all of law enforcement and the regulatory authorities can all have access to that same information about what services and what entities are behind these transactions, that allows us to take unprecedented steps in being able to collaborate on weeding out illicit activity. And you point out that the government has also managed to seize record sums of money from these cases in a world in which people thought that it was anonymous and that it was unable to be seized. So law enforcement can have these types of successes in this environment.
I think it's interesting when you compare cryptocurrency to cash, on the other hand. And if you think about cash is fully anonymous. It's untraceable. There's no underlying record of the chain of ownership with cash. And no one knows where a particular $100 bill may have been, whose hands it may have passed through, or how many hands it may have passed through. So it seems to me that an individual that wants to break the law without being traced would probably find cash a more attractive alternative than cryptocurrency. Do you agree that cash is less traceable than cryptocurrency?
Indeed, Senator. Cash is far less traceable than cryptocurrency for the point that you point out. The other thing about this is that it's the case that law enforcement also has the permanence of the record when it comes to cryptocurrency. That cases far back in the past can be solved based on information that is collected in the future. The problem with a cash transaction is that when I hand you a $10 bill, that's a completely ephemeral event, and that is never captured forever. And so, prosecutors are able to actually leverage the permanence of the blockchain to have conclusive evidence of the type of illicit activity that we're worried about, which is another deterrent against criminals using it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yet, when you go back to thinking about cash, I don't hear anybody saying that we ought to outlaw the use of cash. Do you hear that? I don't think so. In reality, the mischaracterization that crypto is the Wild West of illicit finance, I'd hate to see that be used in a way to open the door to drop a morass of regulation on an industry that poses so much potential for America and for our competitive advantage. Mr. Levin, I'd like to continue to follow up. There's a lot of discussion here on Capitol Hill that Congress needs to craft legislation to make it harder to use cryptocurrency to evade sanctions. One of your firm's specialties is tracking cryptocurrency transactions and monitoring potentially illicit activity. So hypothetically, how would someone trying to evade sanctions convert their cryptocurrency holdings into fiat without interfacing with the banking system?
So, Senator, the question about how to move from cryptocurrency into traditional finance requires a traditional financial institution. And there are these interfaces that have been the subject of anti-money laundering legislation globally. And so I think that, to your question, you cannot move from cryptocurrency into traditional finance without interfacing with one of those institutions that has the regulatory obligations that protect us against its abuse.
The sanctionable regulatory obligations, just to be clear. Mr. Moser, just very quickly, I think that there's been a lot of attention paid to the possibility that digital assets are undermining America's sanctions regime. And I'd like to just get your perspective on what Congress can or should do to help authorities and firms in the crypto space more effectively fight illicit finance.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty. Yeah, I think the most thing that Congress can do is help provide clarity. There are a lot of crypto firms out there that would like to be certain in that they are complying with the law, and I think there's a lot of debate, particularly across the SEC and the CFTC, about what exactly is needed to be in compliance. And so,
and who's in charge of compliance?
And who's in charge of compliance. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people that really want to have a business model that's successful for everybody. And by the way, that means a safe financial system that people feel comfortable putting their money into. And they're just looking to know, what exactly should I do what's the standard and what should I meet?
I appreciate your point on certainty and clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator.